3.
Cool.
Right.
Okay.
Hello.
Hello, everyone. Morning, and welcome to the SASSI webinar series on the ways to save. As you know, it's July Savings Month, and we've got a series of webinars that are running through the month of July into August. And we'd like to welcome everyone who's taken the time to join us on this first webinar. I would encourage you to stick with us through the entire series because the content will be different every week, and we are all going to get an opportunity to empower ourselves and build that financial resilience in challenging times which we're in currently. Please feel free to post any questions you want for Maya, who will be our host this morning. She will address your questions at the end of the presentation. And if you have any other interest or you'd like to keep up with what's going on, please don't forget there's the waystosave.co.za, waystosave.co.za website, where there's a lot of content in terms of tools you can use, as well as podcasts which you can enjoy and view on that platform. So I'd like to formally welcome Maya. Welcome to the Way to Save, and I hand the floor and the mic over to you.
Thank you, Gerald. And thank you to everybody who's joined today. I must just say I am absolutely freezing down here in Cape Town. We have storms, we even have snow. And while I would like to this afternoon climb under a blanket with a big glass of red wine, my children want to go snow hunting. So that's where I'm going to be this afternoon. I hope you're all staying a little bit warmer in the rest of the country. Now, I don't know if any of you listened in on the SASSI introduction webinar we did on Wednesday, where I spoke about credit extension and the impact that that's having on our savings. And, you know, everyone always says to me, oh, why do we have such a low savings rate in South Africa? What is wrong with us in South Africa? And I really do think that one of our big issues is the fact that we have become hooked or addicted to credit. We think that everything that we want or need, we just put on our credit cards, our store cards. We'll take out a loan for it. Don't worry, you know, buy now and pay later. And we really have got caught in that mindset in South Africa because we do have a very, very sophisticated financial sector and credit extension in South Africa, especially compared to other peers. People in countries that earn similar incomes to us have similar poverty issues. Their credit extension is not quite as developed. And I do think there is definitely a correlation between the two of them. And one of the arguments that I made was I had a look at the credit extension in South Africa. So just to give you an idea, we as households owe about 1.8 trillion rand, 1.8 trillion rand in debt, but that includes home loans and car finance. If you strip those out and you look just at credit card debt, store cards, those sorts of things, we owe about 410 billion rand. But of that, 168 billion is just fees and interest. And I think I'm taking it upon myself to try and get South Africans to motivate them to say, why give 168 billion to credit providers in interest and fees when you could actually be putting that towards savings? And one of the other ones I discussed was how often this debt is hidden from us largely, or the real cost of this debt, because we just look at what we repay each month. We don't really understand how that's broken up in fees and interest and capital. And one of the examples I shared was credit card debt. Credit cards are definitely a major problem for most people. And the question I posed was, what would happen if, say, for example, you had a 20,000 Rand credit card debt, you owed 20,000 Rand on your credit card, you listened to Maya's webinar and you decided, I'm never using a credit card again, I'm going to park it, I'm going to lock it in a drawer, but I'm just going to pay the minimum amount, that little amount that the bank requires from me or my credit card provider requires from me each month. How long would it take me to pay it off? If I was running a poll, which I'm not right now, but I would tell you that most of you would say 2 years, some of you 5 years. No one would answer 25 years, which is actually the figure. And the reason for that is twofold. One, it is you're only paying back 3% of the total balance. That's how revolving credit works, 3% of the total balance per month. But in the meantime, that barely pays off your 25% interest rate on your credit card. And the other problem is that it is on your outstanding balance. So as your balance declines, so When you owe 20,000 Rand, you may only be paying 600 Rand minimum. But as it declines and you get to you owe 10,000 Rand, your minimum repayment drops to 300 Rand. Remember, because it's a percentage of your minimum, of your total balance. So it literally takes you forever to pay off your credit card, but you don't realize that because you're constantly spending and using it. And it allows you to prop up your lifestyle. So what I wanted to do today is to take you on a journey with me. This is the journey of money makeover competition. This is a challenge that I've been working with City Press for the last 4 years. For the last 3 years, ABSA has been our partner. And we take 6 people each year. We give them a financial advisor. We put them through a program. And the impact that this has and the amount of debt these people are able to pay off in such a short period of time, I tell you, gives me the most unbelievable hope. I am surprised every single year. And right now I'm actually collating for the finalists. They're going to be, the finalists are going to be, the winner is going to be announced on the 18th of July. And again, I'm always amazed at what these people achieve in such a short period of time. And it just is testimony to the fact that if you put a plan in place, you will achieve your goals. So I'm going to just go now to, going to have to share my screen. So you have to give me a second whilst I share my screen so that I can take you through this, through the money makeover journey with you. Okay. So as I said, this is the money makeover journey. You can follow it, by the way, at CP Money Makeover. It's been in City Press and You Magazine. So these are the candidates that we've had over the last few years. And as I said, these are the people that we've taken through. This is our final, our candidates for this year. Meet the class of 2020. They've also been an amazing bunch of people. But I wanted to start showing you a little bit about how we've worked with them. One of the biggest problems we've had with this group, and it's been quite interesting, is credit card debt. Credit card debt has definitely been, for them, one of the biggest challenges. This is Peter. So Peter, when he joined Money Makeover, his big thing was in his application, he said, I don't understand it. I have this credit card and I'm paying, I pay off when I get a little bit of money here and there, and I've, cashed in a few things and I throw it into the credit card, but the balance never goes down. I don't understand what I'm doing wrong. Now, keep in mind, Peter's been following Money Makeover for many years. He's actually quite a big fan. He tweets about it. He's been tweeting me. And this year, he actually entered himself. So I would have thought that he would have had a little bit of insight into what was going on with his credit card. And when I spoke to him, he said to me, well, at the moment, I think he clocked up about 60,000 Rands worth of credit card debt. And his situation had been that he had left a big corporate for a startup business. So he'd had a bit of a salary drop, but it was okay. They were making ends meet. It was working it out. He was using his credit card here and there when he needed to. And, he said, had the bank contacted him and said to him, we're going to give you 60,000 Rands worth of credit, he would have said no. But he said it was those incremental jumps. So, he had a credit card, he used it a bit, maybe 10,000 Rand, and then it was at max. Things were getting a bit tough. The bank phones, we'll extend it for another 5,000. He said, okay, that will help me out this month, and so on and so forth. And he spoke about this incremental falling into this credit trap, this credit card trap. As I said, credit cards are hard to know because you pay in a little bit, then you spend, you pay, you spend. So the first thing we did with him is we said, okay, what is happening in your day-to-day spending that you're going deeper and deeper into debt? And Peter had given us his budget when he applied. So every single candidate has to give us their budget as part of their application to join Money Makeover. And Peter had done this. And when we went through and made him do a proper budget, and when I talk about a proper budget, go over your last 3 months worth of bank statements, credit cards, store cards, and actually itemize absolutely everything you've spent. Peter discovered that he was spending 5,000 Rand more than he was earning. But the family did not realize it because the credit card had masked that for them. So unless you're actually keeping track of every single expense and understand where everything is going, there is a very high chance that you are constantly every month living beyond your means. And a credit card and overdraft facility, that's the other really bad kind of structure, allows you to continuously do this. And it was that awareness for Peter that this was actually the problem. And I have to tell you, Peter's not alone. Every single candidate that has ever come onto Money Makeover is always surprised by how much they spend. They always think they spend less than they do. And that is the reality. So if you are sitting here listening and thinking, how do I change my finances? I'm afraid it starts with something very boring. It's called a spending plan or a budget. And I love this. This is not my quote. I have to tell you, this is Dave Ramsey, who wrote the Total Money Makeover book, hence my idea for the Money Makeover competition. I was very fortunate to edit his book for South Africa, so I have stolen his quote. If you don't tell your money where to go, it will leave. And that's exactly what we found, what you find. If you don't know and you don't tell your money, I need you to do this, I need you to do that, it's just going to disappear and whittle away. These are some comments from our candidates. So Mabatu was last year, one of our last year candidates. And when we analyzed her budget, we discovered that she was spending 2,000 Rand a month on KFC breakfasts. She was shocked. She was absolutely horrified. And how this happened was she would wake up in the morning, getting the kids ready for school, didn't really have time for breakfast, would drop them at school and then pop in at KFC for a coffee. But because she was hungry, she would land up buying something else to eat. And she had never worked out what that habit was actually costing her. Now imagine coming on saying, I've got some debts I need to repay, and discovering that simply by eating breakfast at home and maybe making a coffee at home, you could actually have 2,000 Rand extra to start targeting your debts. I mean, just like that. Booty, he was on our competition 3 years ago. I loved his one because he discovered how much he was spending at the bottle store when he went through his credit card statement. And he was absolutely horrified at how much he was spending. Now, Booty is not necessarily an alcoholic. What was happening was that Booty was a bachelor, and his friends would all come around every Friday, Saturday. Hey, they'd meet out at Booty's place, and they'd have fun and chat and all the rest of it because Booty was providing the booze. And when Booty realized this and realized that this is probably why his credit card had got to 60,000 Rand in debt, he changed his behavior. And he had to say to his friends, I love you guys. I love you coming to visit, but you bring your own Johnny Walker Blue Label next time. Okay. So that was another of those kind of like shifting moments when he realized what was happening. And I've also used Nonu here, who's one of our current candidates for this year. And what I found also interesting with her is that she, to me, spoke her sort of revelation of her budget, kind of spoke to that thing about if you don't tell your money where to go, it will leave. And she was saying, I was spending, I'd pay my bills and that, and I just, whatever was left over, I'd spend. And I didn't realize that just by allocating some of that, just even 100 Rand here, 100 Rand there into my debt repayments, that I could actually get rid of this credit card. I just was kind of just spending and paying the minimum. And it was that realization for her that a couple of 100 Rand or even 100 Rand really, really makes a difference. So again, this is about going in and seeing, is your money doing what it really, really needs to do for you? Now, this is an example. Everyone says, how do I do a budget? Where do I start? Very simple. If you have a computer, there's a good chance you've got Excel on it. This is a personal monthly budget on Excel. You can just create it. Our family uses two things. We use that, and we also use the 22/7 app. I think Nonu actually was also using the 22/7 app. But there's a lot of budgeting tools out there that you can use. But that is a really good start. It's in dollars because it's American, but just don't look at the little dollar sign. Pretend it's an R for a Rand sign. I think you can even reset it to do an R. So that is where you can really just sort of start that template, go through your statements, especially your statements from January to March, because of course that's pre-lockdown. And I think one of the great things about lockdown is it's shown us what we don't have to be spending. If you're still earning a salary, many of you will realize you actually had a little bit more money at the end of the month because there was no eating out and no clothes shopping. So that's what I would recommend. And on the other one, I want to tell you a little bit of a personal story, these envelopes. I haven't used the envelope system for Money Makeover, but I have used it for my own journey. And I want to share my own journey with you for a minute here as well. So 16 years ago, I gave birth to my second son. And I felt that it was now time to buy a big house because I now needed more space for the kids, okay? This may resonate with many of you, any of those people who are having kids and like, oh, this space is not big enough, even though it is. We need to spend money. So we bought this big house, and within about an 18-month period, both my husband and I lost our jobs. So think about this. Just had a second child. moved into a big house with a big mortgage and serious renovation requirements, and we both have lost our income. So we were lucky. My husband found work quite soon, but it was on a lower salary with a bonus potential. I decided to go into freelance, and it takes a long time to build up your freelance business. So in some ways, we were quite similar to Peter's journey, where income had dropped, but we didn't change our spending. We didn't change our lifestyle. We just kept going because, well, the bonus will come, something will happen. And it wasn't long before we fell into some serious overdraft debt. So we had this massive overdraft sitting on our bank account. And I have to be honest, I didn't realize it. Every time I swiped the card went through and I wasn't really paying attention. But when I realized what was happening was when my husband got his first bonus. And I was so excited because I had such plans for that bonus. I was going to hang up curtains. I was going to buy cushions. We were going to renovate the house. We were going to do stuff. And he said, no, we've got to use it to pay off the overdraft. And it was at that moment that I made a decision that I was going to get rid of debt, and I was never, ever, ever, ever going to allow that to happen again. And what we did in order to get used to not using that overdraft and not using cards is we actually used the envelope system. So I drew up the budget, and then I worked out each week what we could afford to spend on the categories, and we drew the cash and put it in an envelope. And when that envelope was finished, it was finished. And it's important, you'll see the categories that I maybe have on those envelopes, but it's also important to have some luxuries there. Of course, you may want to go and buy a bottle of wine when you can, or buy the odd takeaway, but it's got to fit into the budget. And we did that for a couple of months until we felt comfortable going back and actually using the cards again. So that's just a tip I want to share with you, because some people say to me, I just don't know how I'm going to get the discipline to do this when it's so easy to swipe a card. If you're really serious about it, you can use the envelope system. I also want to talk about budgeting for family commitments, because this is also a big theme that comes up in Money Makeover. And in fact, this was last year's winner, Samcare. And Samcare was a young woman who, started working. And part of the issue was that, wow, suddenly I have all this money and everybody gives me. She said literally the first thing that happened when she went to open her bank account for her salary was they gave her a credit card. First thing they did. So she had this credit card that allowed her to buy clothes and shoes and all of this. And she took on loans. And then her family needed help. And she was, of course, was the one who was earning money. So everyone started coming to her, and she felt so guilty. I mean, how can I be buying nice clothes myself when I'm not helping the family? So she kept taking out one loan after the other to support her family. So one of the things we did is we said, right, Samke, you've got to build your family commitment into your budget. It's got to be part of your budget. Part of your spending plan must be your family commitment. Have a discussion with your family about what you can afford. And what they can know is that they can rely on that money every single month. That set money that you've put in your budget, they can rely on. But you are not an ATM. They cannot just come to you ad hoc there, because they're not managing their money. Because it's also important, if you're going on this journey, your family have to recognize that as well. So what Samke said to me was she found that after implementing this, the first month, they all came knocking on the door. And she said no. Second month, they knocked on her door. She said no. They didn't even come the third month. So it takes time. You have to train the family to learn that this is all that you can commit, and that is your commitment. But at the same time, Samke had a mother who's quite ill, and she knew that there was going to be some hospital bills coming up at some point. So we also created an emergency fund for the family. I often talk about an emergency fund for yourself, but it's also important to have something, if you have family commitments, that you're putting money aside knowing. Because let me tell you, if your mom's sick and you've got these hospital bills, you will pay them. You're not going to say, sorry, it's outside of my budget. You will go and you'll put it on your credit card, you'll take out the loans, you'll do whatever it takes. So it's very important for you to accept and build that into part of your financial strategy. And what I also find is there are a lot of people who are supporting family through education. So they may be paying for siblings to go to university. You know the registration fees are coming up in January. Prepare for them, have a fund, and put that money away. So I think the family commitment, yes, we talk about black tax, we talk about all these things, but they are things that you can also plan for and put into your budget. But it's a two-way process. Your family have to also understand that there are limits to what you can do. So now, we've done the budget, we've understood where the spending is going, and then we look at the debt. And the thing with debt is that, and this was very interesting, I think Colin, one of our candidates this year, said to me, he said, you know what, I knew how much I was paying each month, I just didn't know what my total debt was. And when I looked at my total debt, that's when I got a really big fright. And I think that's also very important. Do a spreadsheet and write down all of your debts. Understand what they are, the nature of them, how long before they're paid off, what are they costing you. Just get a really good handle on it. It's a scary process if you have quite a lot of debt, I might warn you, but you know, it's an important step. So in this spreadsheet, you'll see that I put up, you name the, you put the name of it. I'm used Foschini as an example of a store card, and you use your credit card, bank loan. I don't have an overdraft there. I should have put one of those in, car, home loan. Then the type of debt is very important. Store cards and credit cards are what we call this revolving credit. And for me, they are dangerous because it's open-ended. You never know how much you owe, what the interest really is, and you're just using it. It's always there. It's like a temptation to constantly be tapping in and using this credit. What is actually quite a lot better if you do need to take on debt, and I'm going to talk a little bit later about how one of our candidates has done this, is actually term loans. If you really, I mean, obviously I prefer you to be saving for things and to preparing for things, but if you really need to borrow a lump sum, look at considering a term loan where you know exactly how much you're going to pay each month and when it ends so that you have a date at the end of the period. The other one you really need to look at is if you have car finance. Now, if you follow me at all on myonmoney.co.za, but if you follow me, it's myonmoney is my handle. If you follow me, you will know one thing. I hate balloon payments and residual payments on cars. I think they should be banned. If I was in control, a lot would be happening, but that would be definitely one of them. So balloon payment is when you go to the dealer, you say, oh, I love that car, but I can only afford 5,000 Rand a month. And they say, don't worry, we'll just take 30% of the car financing. You will stick it at the end and you can pay it much later. It is a terrible idea. It hikes up the amount of interest you end up paying, and most people have clean forgotten about it by the time the payoff happens and they don't have the money to pay for it. So when you're doing this debt spreadsheet, make sure your balloon payment is part of that outstanding balance. And obviously you'll have how much you're paying each month and also the interest. Understand the interest you are paying. So many people don't even know the interest rate on their debt. Also understand the fees. There is a fee, a credit fee. I put 69 Rand. This is the least you'll be paying. Every single credit installment has that, but you may have other weird fees that you don't know about or that are on there. Understand them. The other one you may pick up on there is something called credit insurance or balance protection. This is a very, very, very important insurance to understand if you have it. Now, you may, if you are a follower of mine, you will know I've done a lot of videos and articles on credit insurance. But I really implore you, if you're worrying about being retrenched, find out if you have credit insurance and on what debt you have it. Almost every store card has balance protection. And that means that if you are retrenched, it can actually cover your debt repayments, so your monthly installments, between 6 to 12 months, depending on when you took out the credit insurance. So very important to understand and get a handle on. And then, of course, understand the end date, like when does this end? So that you've got some idea of how long this process is. And this is why I don't like revolving credit, because there never is an end date. Now, okay, I'm going to go back a slide. I want to prep you for this. So now what we did with our candidates, once we understood their budgets, then we understood their debt exposure. We applied what we call the snowball effect. So the snowball effect to pay off debt is where you take your smallest debt and you target that one first. Some people say target your interest rate, highest interest rate first, but I don't necessarily do that. I would rather target the smallest one. And the reason for that is it's a quick win. So for you women out there who have ever dieted, you will know that if you can lose, like in the first week, you lose a K or 2 Ks, you feel like, oh, I can do this. I'm motivated. Okay. It's the same thing. You can pay off one. And the amount of people who've messaged me to say during lockdown, because they had extra money, because they weren't spending it on petrol and eating out and all of that, have settled off a store card or a couple of store cards. If you've been able to do that, it just motivates you to be able to go on and tackle the next debt and the next debt and the next debt. So it was one of the questions we actually got through, I think on Wednesday, was how do I tackle my debts? And for me, it is about the snowball effect or domino effect. So let me show you how it works. So say, for example, you have 1,000 Rand. you've managed to make some cutbacks in your income, and you think, right, I can allocate 1,000 Rand to my debt repayment. But you have a retail store card, you've got 50,000 Rands worth of short-term debt. So retail store card, clothing account, personal loan, and credit card. And you're paying currently an installment to each of those. Now, what you do is you take the 1,000 Rand, and remember, let me go back. If you remember, the retail store card of 3,000 Rand was the lowest balance. So I'm going to target that one first. I'm going to take that 1,000 Rand. I'm going to increase my monthly repayment from the 300 I was paying to 1,300. That means that basically within a month, I've paid that off. Just over within 2 months, rather, I'm going to have paid that off. Then I now have 1,300 Rand available, because that 1,000 Rand's actually grown to 1,300 because I'm no longer paying that 300 on that retail store card. So I'm going to take this 1,300 and I'm going to add it to my clothing store account of 500 Rand. So I'm currently paying 500. I'm going to add the 1,300 and it's going to be 1,800 or 1.8. Okay. That is now going to be the amount that I'm allocating. I pay that off and I now have 1,800, and I add that to my personal loan, pay off my personal loan, and then I add it to my credit card in this particular order because of the size of those loans. And as you can see, you actually basically move from having 1,000 Rand spare cash to having nearly 5,000 Rand spare cash in your budget, because you've slowly but surely targeted those debts and turned them into disposable income. So that's, for me, is really what we've done, and it's a really, really good process. And what you, of course, I use 1,000 Rand. You may have more, and you'll be able to target those quicker. But that, to me, is a really, really good way to start paying off your debts, rather than trying to pay a little bit here and there and all the rest. Have a plan. I've also came across this great debt payoff calculator, again on Excel. These things are free. They're on your computer. It's called a credit card payoff calculator, but I call it a debt payoff calculator. It's very simple. You can type in how much do you owe, what is your interest rate, what are you currently paying, how do you want to increase it, and it can actually work it out for you, and it can even give you an end date as to when you'll be paid off, and it'll actually give you an idea of how much interest you're saving. So just a simple calculator like that will give you some idea. Of course, what it's missing in there are things like fees, like that 69 Rand fee, but at least will give you some idea of the time that you will have paid off the debt. So just a really nice little tool I wanted to share with you there. Now, this was an interesting question, and funny enough, I was going to talk about this anyway, and it came up as a question today. So one of the things that we did also is this Mishak. So this is Mishak here, and Mishak also had he had really big credit card debt, but his credit card debt wasn't because, like Peter, which was just a lifestyle debt. He had actually had a couple of life experiences. He'd had to help his mom out to buy her own house. He'd had a brother who needed help. His wife had some health issues. So this credit card debt had become really big, and I'm talking like over 100,000, like really big credit card debt relative to his income. So what he did, what we've done with him, and this is very interesting, we've taken that credit card and we've turned it into he's turned it into a term loan, so that he knows that there's a date that it will end. Now, what was interesting was that when he entered Money Makeover, he didn't actually qualify, or he did sort of qualify for a term loan, but it was really, really expensive. And there was a question as to whether or not the bank would issue it. Because remember, this is effectively debt consolidation in some sense. And he was so over indebted with all the store cards and that there wasn't really, the bank wasn't too keen to give him this term loan. But because over the last 6 months, he's used the snowball effect to target each of those smaller debts, he's cleaned up so much debt that he was now, and this is, I'm talking about literally in the last week, he was able to apply for this term loan. They've issued the term loan at a better interest rate than his credit card. And he now has a set date as to when this loan will be paid off. And he can also, if he wants to, pay an extra to shorten that period. So I think that a term loan can really, really work if you've got a really big credit card debt. But the key here, and sorry, I should have said this on the slide earlier, the absolute key is that you close these accounts when you've paid them off. Because if you just keep them and you start spending again, then all that hard work has been for nothing. So what Mishak's done is he's gone and drastically lowered his credit card limit to just a few thousand Rand a month, so that it's because he uses it for his to buy groceries, day to day, it gives him good reward points. but a limit low enough that he settles that credit card in full every single month. It's not a lifestyle card, it's purely a transaction card. So I think that is a really, really powerful way as well. So if you're finding, though, that you're not in a position to consolidate at this stage, do the snowball effect, get rid of those little store cards, the other little bits and pieces, and then perhaps reapply to the bank to see if that is an option for you. I just wanted to add in this briefly, just catching up your payment holiday. You know, a lot of people have taken out their payment holiday during lockdown. One of our candidates, Bella, had to do that. She's an entrepreneur in construction, and she literally didn't work for 3 months. So she's had to take it. Now, these payment holidays are very, very expensive, especially the ones on mortgages. Just as an example, if you had a R1 million mortgage, you had paid off 5 years, maybe had 15 years left still, and you took that 3-month payment holiday, it actually cost you 106,000 Rand more. It's going to cost you 106,000 Rand more and extend your home loan by 14 months. No one told you that. They all said, oh, just keep in mind interest is capitalized. But we don't know what that actually means. And what it actually means is you're going to be paying this loan off for a whole more than a year longer, and it's going to cost you 106,000. So if you have taken it, within next year, when things are a bit better, hopefully your salary's back in action, look at making up those payments, either by increasing your installments by 5%. So, you know, if your installment's 10,000 Rand, you know, increase it to 10,500 Rand. So increase it just increase it, and you will pay it off over the same time that you would have originally. Or in a year's time, if you find that you don't have that 5% available, you can't increase it by that amount, just increase it by 1%, and every year thereafter just increase it by a further 1%. So it's just an extra 100 Rand increase each year into your mortgage. So just a little bit of a tip that if you have taken that payment holiday, don't think it's well, actually it's exactly like a holiday as far as I'm concerned. It's like a holiday where you go on holiday and you have to pay for it, okay? That's exactly what it is. And you don't want to come back from that holiday and owe a huge amount of money. So this is my advice to you. Now I want to just get to, so obviously our candidates now have, you know, they're at the process of we've done the budgets, we've looked at debt, we've given them debt repayment plans. But one of the big questions is, how do I put all of this together and still also invest? So one of the things I haven't mentioned is that the first thing we actually did with all the candidates, once we had done their budget, was before and although we had the debt repayment plan in place, the first thing we did is we made them build up their emergency fund. So I would say that you have to build your emergency fund before you even start accelerating debt repayments. And this is because it is emergencies that get everybody into debt in the first place. I mean, that's exactly the story with Mishak. Mishak's credit card was actually a series of emergencies that landed up. And so what I want you to do is at least start off with, even if it's a small amount, 15,000 Rand. Over time, you want to know that you've got at least 3 months of your expenses covered. That's the goal. If some people even say 6 months, but if you get to 3 months, you're doing better than most. But at least start with 15,000 Rand. And only then do you start doing the snowball. So the snowball effect. Because it's very important that you've got that emergency fund in place first, so you don't have to access credit when emergencies happen. And then you allocate debt. And then I also want you to, from there, when you get bonuses or rebates from the taxman, not to stop this habit of using it to settle all your debt. Now, people are going to say, oh, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? You know, debt is so expensive. You're telling me I must invest. I'm telling you, it's a bad habit people get into. We spend all year on credit cards. Then we get the 13th check and we settle off all our spending from the last year. And then we repeat the cycle all over again. Every year you wait for a windfall. It's my pension. I'll pull down my pension to pay off my debt. We wait for windfalls to pay off our debt. And we never start investing. And the impact that has on our ability to create wealth is enormous. You have to start thinking about creating wealth, not just about paying off debt. It's both of those strategies have to be in place. So maybe when you get your, let's hope the world goes back to normal and one day you get a bonus, or at least you're going to get a tax rebate. Yes, maybe use a little portion of that to firstly top up your emergency fund. Then maybe you want to use a little bit to settle debt, but I really want you to allocate some of that into starting to invest in something like, for example, a tax-free savings account or tax-free investment. And then even in your budget, if you have a little bit of extra money, even if it's 200 Rand a month, just starting to contribute to investments. Mishak, who I mentioned earlier, he actually won one of our incentive spot prizes on the Money Makeover. And he chose to use that. And remember, he's got this big credit card debt, but he's actually put it in an account to start saving for his children's education, because he also has that to do. He also has those liabilities ahead of him. So yes, have your debt repayment plan, understand your debt repayment plan, but also at the same time, don't forget to start saving towards those things so that you never have to use and borrow money again. Then we also looked at the retirement funding of all of our candidates. And of course, when you're in debt, most people have fallen behind on retirement savings. Almost every South African doesn't have enough for retirement. But at least we understood what the gap was. Where should you be right now? What do you need to be getting there? In some cases, some of them had a little bit of money and they were able to, someone like Colin, who's got these property funds, he was able to use a little bit of money to start to boost his retirement. But somebody like Katerine, one of our other candidates, there just isn't any money right now for retirement. She's got to sort out a few of her finances. But next year, she's committed to starting to increase her contributions to her retirement. So have a strategy, understand the gap, and have a strategy. If you're employed and you work for a corporate, you're probably part of the company pension fund. You may have even had to stop your contributions at the moment if you've had to take a pay cut. But go to the HR and say, next year, when my salary goes back up or when I get a salary increase, can you increase the amount that I contribute to my company's fund? So you've got time, let your retirement build up and make sure that you start adding to it going forward. So it must be part of your plan. And you'll notice that I've got mortgage, pay off faster as my last on the hierarchy. And this may be controversial. People are going to say, oh, but I want to pay off my mortgage. Everyone wants to pay off their mortgage because it's such a massive amount of debt. But I have a different view on that. I think that your house, have again a strategy as to a date it's going to be paid off. But if all you're doing is paying off debt and not building and investing, what are you going to do? You're going to have a house that's paid off, but no other assets or no other wealth that you've built up. So I think what I really would recommend you do with your mortgage is always try and pay 10% more. Once you've stabilized, increase your monthly installment by 10%. At least do that. And the reason I said, so if you pay 10,000 Rand a month on your mortgage, increase it to 11,000. Increase it by that 1,000 Rand. That creates a buffer. That immediately creates a buffer if interest rates go up. It also starts building a little bit of equity into your home. So if you run into trouble at some point, you can actually draw down on that. So for me, that's almost part of my emergency saving element. It's almost like saying that's the little buffer. That's the thing that's going to protect me if things change. But in terms of, again, getting a bonus, getting all those things, if you get a bit of a windfall, don't just only focus on paying off a mortgage. Make sure you've put those other building blocks in place first. And then once you're kind of comfortable with all of those, then of course you can start perhaps putting some extra money into your mortgage. That's a strategy I use. I've definitely I prioritize my investments, but if I have extra cash, I target my mortgage. And this is why this is very important. This is why I talk about you have to invest, okay, and not just focus only on debt. This is because of the power of time. So there's something called the Rule of 72. And the Rule of 72 says that if you take your interest rate, so you take the number 72 and you divide it by your interest rate, and it'll tell you the number of years that you double your money. So 72, if you're earning 10% a year, you divide it through, and every 7.2 years, your money doubles. Okay, so that's just the number I've used here. I've assumed 10% growth. You're 30 years old. You have saved 100,000 Rand in your pension fund. And no other contributions. I'm just assuming that particular lump sum of 100,000 Rand. Every 7 years, it doubles. Okay, if you're getting returns. 10, but this is how things double. Things don't go from 100 to 200 to 300. They go 100, 200, 400, 800, 1.6, 3.2. So now you should realize how critical those last 7 years are. This last 7 years, between 58 and 65, are your big years. That's the years that you start to really make money. So the longer you delay this, the less time you actually have. And you'll see on the other column, if you were 30 and you decided to cash in your pension, okay, which almost everyone does, by the way, 90% of people do that. They change jobs around the age of 30 and cash it in. You're starting 7 years later. It takes you another 7 years to accumulate. You've only got the 100,000 at 37. Yes, it doubles, but you lose those last 7 years that you had in the previous column, because now you don't have that chance of that 1.6 going to 3.2, or you delay retirement by 7 years. So I want to also show you that mechanism. So people often say, I want to retire at 55. It's very hard to retire at 55, because 55 to 65 is when your pension is going to have its biggest growth. So also keep that in mind when you're looking at your retirement planning. And this is just another graph I want to share with you. This is actually based on, I need a sip of water. This is based on tax-free savings accounts. It's just some numbers I ran. So it is based on last year's allocation, which was 33,000 Rand. It's now 36,000 Rand. But just look, this is if you'd made that if you just put in every single month the amount into your tax-free savings account, look how it grows over 15 years. That blue part is the benefit of compounding growth. And that is why you start, always show compounding as this graph that gets steeper and steeper and steeper as it gets to the top, because that is what is happening. The money starts growing, interest earns interest, earns interest. And after by the end of the 15th year, you've only put in just under 500,000, which is your limit for your lifetime limit, but you've had 650,000 Rands of growth. It's worth over 1.1 million Rand. And what is really important, somebody asked this question about being tax efficient. If you did not save that in a tax-free savings account and you saved it outside of that, that is capital gains. That blue part is something called capital gains, and the receiver of revenue will take a portion of it. If you saved it in a tax-free savings account, they can't take a portion of it. So I always say your first, nowadays, 3,000 Rand a month that you're going to save should be in a tax-free savings account, so that you are at least protected from the taxman going forward. And this is just the other question I always get is like, where do I invest my money and how do I allocate it and how do I look at risk? So just to give you an idea, the blue stuff is what I call autopilot: retirement funds, tax-free savings accounts, unit trust, exchange-traded funds, managed portfolios where it's managed for you. This is stuff where you don't have to think too much about it. You put it away, as long as it's with a decent company, or you're not overpaying for it, you can leave it there and it gets managed for you. And that's the bulk of our money. The bulk of our money will sit in those sorts of investments where we don't have to worry too much about them. But if you're somebody who would like to get into other types of investing, you want to have your own share portfolio where you choose your own shares, or you want to get into property investing, there is absolutely a space for it. But I don't think it should be your entire portfolio. And the reason for this is these are all higher risk, and they require more. And the reason they're higher risk is because they require more homework. You need to do your homework. If you're going to buy individual shares, you need to know what you're doing. You need to know how to research shares. You need to know how to analyze them. You need to spend quite a bit of time on them. Property investing. Please, if you want to know about property investing, follow Colin's story on Money Makeover, because it'll also show you that you can't just go and buy properties and hope that that's going to be a good investment. You have to do so much homework to make sure you're buying the right property in the right structures. Understand tenant risk, understand interest rate risks. These are not simple investments. These are not, you do need to do your homework getting into them. And then everybody says, should I invest in cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin? Listen, there's always, maybe there's an opportunity there, who knows, but it should be a very, very small part of your portfolio. This should not be all your savings. You should not be cashing in your retirement funds for these kind of incredibly high risk ventures. If your friend's got a new app that they reckon is going to change the world, by all means, but this should not be part of your retirement savings. It should be extra money that you're prepared to risk and to lose. Very important. Anything in that little last wedge there is money that you're prepared to lose. So I wanted to end off with this quote before we open for questions. And this quote has kind of been my favorite quote for lockdown. And I'll tell you why. Don't judge each day by the harvest you reap, but by the seeds that you plant. This was said by Robert Louis Stevenson, well known for writing a children's book called Treasure Island. But what I love about this quote is it kind of feels to me that COVID and lockdown this is what this is about. our harvests may be very poor right now. We may be really worried about our money. We may be worrying about all sorts of things. But this is the opportunity as well to plant the seeds so that we can harvest in the future. Because the changes you make today about your money and your finances are going to set you on a completely new path. And one thing I can tell you with Money Makeover is that all 6 candidates, of our 6 candidates, four of them had a drop in income as a result of lockdown. And yet not one of them had to take on debt. Not one of them was failed on their budgeting. They all made it through there. They all came out at this end of the 6 months stronger than they were in January, despite COVID. And that is because of the seeds that they planted. So I'm really, really encouraging you today to start planting your seeds. And that brings us to the question, the end of my presentation and the start of you asking me questions. Oh, is there a poll question? So are we going to ask a poll? Gerald?
Yeah. I think, everybody who's got any questions, please just remember at the bottom of your screen, there's a ask a question button. Please don't put your questions on the commentary, rather ask your questions in the questions section. And there is a poll you can participate on there. We had a few people inquiring about the slides. I don't think Maya will give you her slides, but the recording of the webinar with all the slides as they were presented will be there for you to view and review at any time on the ways2save.co.za website. Also, by participating in the Ways to Save tools and the website, there is that chance to win that 10,000 Rand tax-free savings account courtesy of ABSA, our partners. Now, it's important to remember what Maya was saying with the tax-free savings account. It's really something which a lot of people do not take into account, that by contributing a maximum 33,000 per year, it'll take you 15 years to reach your 500,000 allocation. But what tends to happen is within 21 years, you'll be looking at 1.7 million, really amazing numbers, and the compounding going on. So tax-free savings account is something which we're not doing enough of. Do that first before you do any other types of investment. And also the tax-free savings account, great for children. Don't go and get the toys, the Ben 10 toys, the toys they play with for 3 months and it's gone and you spent 1,000 Rand. Rather put it into a TFSA. Your child will thank you when they're 21. And
so Gerald, they may not thank you now. So when you said your kid, look, here's the very small gift I'm giving you now, mommy. But trust me, when my son discovered how much money, and I have to tell you, Gerald, unfortunately, when my son was born, he's now 20, we didn't have tax-free savings accounts, and he's built up. I mean, I literally was putting 200 Rand away every month, and it eventually built up to, I think, 160,000 Rand eventually. When he realized he had that, trust me, I was the best mom in the world. So be the best mom in the world and open a tax-free savings account for your kid.
So also, everything Maya is sharing is not financial advice. Let's put on the famous disclaimer. Past performance is not an indication of future performance. So whatever you hear here, it is highly recommended you consult with a professional financial planning professional so that you get proper guidance in terms of what decisions are best for your particular situation and circumstances. So we'll now go into the questions with Maya, and obviously there are 35 questions. The questions which we might not cover today, we're going to roll over to next weekend when I'll be doing the session with Arabile. So over to you, Maya.
Thanks, Gerald. And guys, if I could just point you to a poll, there is a poll running. Has your household experienced a reduction in income? It's just interesting for us to know just, what COVID's doing to people. So if you get a chance to vote on that whilst I'm chatting, that would be appreciated. So yes, lots of questions. Well, okay. So one of the questions I saw actually come through was, is there ever a good time to have a credit card? Can it ever be a good thing? Absolutely. I have credit cards. In fact, I have 2 credit cards, but I use them differently. And credit cards are great. They give you great reward points. They're actually quite cost effective as well because the merchant lands up paying for the transaction fees, not you. But only if you can manage them, only if you pay them off in full at the end of the month. That's the only way to manage a credit card. That's basically the only way. So even if you can set up a debit order so your account is debited automatically with the outstanding balance on your credit card. And just as a matter of interest, if you have a credit card and you have that automatic payoff, a debit order set off to pay it off automatically, it actually does very well on your credit score. It actually helps your credit score quite a lot. So what I would advise is if you feel like you're somebody who can't manage your credit card, do what Mishak does done and drop that right down. Maybe it's R1,000 a month. So you're using it purely for, just for day-to-day stuff that you're going to pay off at the end of the month, or you actually pre-fund it. So when you need to spend on your credit card, actually put the cash into it and spend it that way. So, but really, the minute you're rolling it over to the following months, that's when a credit card becomes really expensive. Right, let me just see some questions. Okay, your tax deductible items. Yeah, so tax-free savings accounts are really important. Your retirement and any retirement savings are very, very cost effective. I just want to make one point here though on tax-free savings accounts. A lot of people use them, invest in cash. So the banks offer them, and the banks have an underlying product that is interest. So you earn 4% interest or something like that. That's not tax efficient. The reason for that is that you already get, irrespective of tax-free savings accounts or not, you already receive 23,800 Rand interest exemption on interest, on tax exemption on interest. So the first 23,800 Rand that you earn on interest, you don't pay tax on anyway. So you could have a balance of 400,000 Rand earning interest before you even start to pay tax. So the real tax benefit of tax-free savings accounts is capital gains and dividend tax, and that's market investments. So I just want to say, if you're wanting to save for short-term goals, like saving for a deposit for cars, even if it's your kids' school fees in 3-4 years' time, you're wanting to invest in interest-based investments, you don't want to be putting that in a tax-free savings account. Some people say it's cheaper to use credit card to pay off home loan quicker. No, okay. What I'm seeing there, I know where that question comes from. So there's this perception that, and I've done a lot of this on my blog, by the way, so I cover it a lot. And people say, well, why don't I take out a personal loan of 5 years and pay off because some people's mortgages are actually quite reasonably low. They maybe own 300,000 or something. And they say, what if I take out a personal loan and actually pay off my credit card there rather than spending 20 years paying off my home loan? You can pay off your home loan tomorrow. Your home loan doesn't have to be 20 years. You can pay an extra. But a credit card's interest rate is at 21% and your home loan's at 7-8%. I mean, you don't want to be using any other credit product except a home loan for a home loan. But then just pay it off quicker. There's nothing stopping it from happening. In fact, you can even take out a home loan for 5 years. You can go to the bank and say, I only want a 5-year home loan. They will issue you one as long as you can afford the monthly repayment. Do you have any tips on how to manage your budget in real life? I go to the shops for groceries after I get my salary check, and it's easy. Yeah, so, it isn't. It is about shopping around. So Joan, I think, asked that question. So Joan's saying, you know what, groceries and stuff is just so expensive. I'm trying to budget. Peter, follow Peter on Money Makeover. He's actually started a blog called The Frugal Family. He's amazing. He does so much comparative shopping, and it is a little bit about comparative shopping. And one thing we've noticed is that prices change all the time. So you'll find Pick n Pay may have a really good special on toilet paper at one point, and look for those specials. You do have to get quite smart with grocery shopping, especially at the moment, because there's these big supply chain problems. So we're having a problem at a factory because they've had to close down due to COVID. There's a shortage. The price will shoot up. It's not Pick n Pay or Checkers putting the prices up. It's a supply chain problem. So do look out for specials. It is really just about shopping smarter. I mean, Peter has really cut back hugely on his grocery bill. So he's a guy to follow for that. Where's the best place to keep emergency funds? Because the interests are so low. Look, don't look at your emergency fund as a growth asset. Okay, so don't worry too much about the interest rates. Obviously, you want to get the best interest rate. So your first 15, 20,000 Rand, you want to have it easily accessible. So maybe put it in a 7-day notice, even a 32-day notice. Put it in there, earning a bit of interest. What I'm finding a lot of people are doing, if they've built up that 3-month emergency fund, and I have to tell you, it is what I've done as well. I have put I keep some of that. I sort of keep 20,000 very available, and the rest I am putting into my mortgage at the moment, because that lump sum in my mortgage is helping, it's effectively giving me, I suppose, the mortgage rate of 7% because I'm saving that and we're not paying it. So just to keep that in mind, but don't worry so much about that emergency fund. Don't look at that as your growth asset. Look at it as your protection, and don't worry too much. Just be a little bit sensible, try and get a good interest rate, but don't panic too much about it. Is it best to go for debt review when you can't pay personal loans? Can you terminate your mandate of counsellors and settle your... Okay. I get so many questions on personal loans. On debt counsellors. Okay. You can go under debt review when you cannot afford to meet your repayments. So the first thing that they'd have to do is they'd have to go through your budget. And if after you've gone through your budget and you've looked at everything, you honestly cannot meet your repayments, then you can apply for debt review. And debt review is incredibly powerful. I have seen people, it's changed their lives, but you have to work with the right debt counselor. You're welcome to email me later if you want some advice or suggestions. So debt counselor must use something called the DCRS rules. So that's the debt counseling rules system. And that allows them to negotiate the interest rates with your credit providers to make sure that it is paid off within a period of time. So I seriously have people that I've recommended to debt counseling. I've written stories about them, someone like Oscar, for example, who have seen their interest rates drop like from 20% down to 2% on certain of their loans because the debt counselors negotiated that. That is a good debt counselor. A not so good debt counselor is somebody who simply takes your debt and pays it off over 7 years. They just simply extend the debt repayments. So all that happens is, yes, your monthly repayments are more affordable, but you're paying it off for so much longer and much higher interest rates. So that's just my advice there. And really work with credible people. There are sadly a lot of fly-by-nights, and really don't just if somebody phones you for debt review, just say no. Rather you seek them out and contact people. These call centers, guys, people are getting talked into debt review too quickly. Is it compulsory for companies to load credit insurance? So funny, Lindilwa. Okay, this is such a funny question. Is it compulsory for a company to load credit insurance? Because if I didn't have a credit insurance, I could have used the money to reduce the actual debt. So credit insurance is on certain products, it's compulsory. Well, because there's certain rules that have been in place to try and protect people, okay? So it's not compulsory on home loans. It's not compulsory on car finance. And you can, I suppose, ask not to have it. But certainly many of the lenders, Capitec, African Bank, want it in place because if you lose your job, they want to know that there's some protection. So what happened was at the beginning of COVID and lockdown, when people started having their income cut, I made the banks realize, I did a video that went viral saying, guys, why are the banks not telling you about your credit insurance? You all have credit insurance on your short-term loans. Those credit insurance, by the way, will cover you if you're retrenched, or even if you are put on leave for 2 or 3 months, unpaid leave, it will pay out your installments. So then I got a whole lot of emails from people saying, but I don't have credit insurance on my car loan or my home loan. Why was it not made compulsory? The banks are so wrong for not making it compulsory. So it's almost like you can't win. When it's there and you have to pay for it, people don't want it. But when they need it, they wish they'd had it. So all I can say is read carefully up about credit insurance. And you can shop around for it. You don't have to take it from the credit provider that you're borrowing from. So you can shop around for other rates. But I do cover a lot of that on my website as well. I'm a young person. How do I go about building a good credit profile? This is an extremely good question because I'm busy sitting here telling you not to have credit cards, not to have store cards. But then on the other side, you're trying to build this credit record. And a credit record needs to show that you can manage your repayments. What I really recommend is that it is about, so the banks are to some degree coming to the party on this. So for example, one of the banks offers a credit light score. So they will look at you and they will look at other things like, do you pay your insurance premiums on time? How do you manage your bank account? Do you have a debit order that goes regularly into an investment account that is never bounced? So they look more at your ability to manage your money. And if you've built up pools of savings, they will consider that. And we're starting to see that more and more and more come through as part of the credit assessment. But if you want to go and buy a house, it's a really big thing that you're going to buy, they generally want to have seen some kind of credit experience. So, and they all tell you to take a credit card. So first thing they do, it's in their interest for you to take a credit card. So if you really feel like you need to do something, take out a credit card, but literally set the limit at 1,000 Rand. That's what you do. Set it at 1,000 Rand. And, or even better still, you can set 1,000 Rand, but put the 1,000 Rand in at the beginning of every month. And then what actually happens is it shows on your payment profile as paid every month. So you spend 1,000 Rand and you settle it in full with that debit order. It's building up a credit history without you actually really getting into too much credit, any credit problems. But I can tell you that insurance premiums, debit orders into investments are also considered as part of your payment history. And that is what banks will look at for as part of your credit score. Okay, I'm not going to answer what kind of account should I open. Okay, what kind of account should I open if I have 300 Rand a month? Again, it depends for you. First of all, do you have an emergency fund? Do you have some cash available? If you can tick that box, what is this money for? Is there anything short-term that you're going to need coming up in the next 2 years that you need to target? Or is this 300 Rand a month that you can actually just leave for the next 15 years? You're just going to put it away and not worry about it. If it's the last one, obviously a tax-free savings account, and just look at, I can't give direct advice into which one to go for, but just a well-balanced one that gives you some offshore exposure, local bonds, equities. But yeah, a little bit, I'll have to, there is a lot on my website on that can assist. Some say RAs are not a good idea as your money is locked away. If you already have a pension, what else can you do? Excellent question. That would be definitely, and I think Kara responded, absolutely your tax-free savings account. So if you already have a company pension, if you're wanting to put more away for retirement, you can always top up your company pension. And that's actually often the more cost-effective way of doing that. And if I was now wanting to save in a more flexible way, your tax-free savings account would be an excellent way, because what happens is that tax-free savings account, everything that grows, and it's growing over years, compounding, comes out tax-free. But so with a pension or RA, yes, you are able to deduct tax from your salary, so you get that tax deduction up front. But on retirement, you have to convert it into an annuity income, and that annuity income is taxed. So I love the complementary way that a tax-free savings account and a pension fund work together. If you start putting money in a tax-free savings account and then at 60 or 55, 60, you draw it out, that's a massive lump sum tax-free that you can use to either generate yourself an income going forward, or you may want to do something else like buy a car or whatever it is at retirement that gives you this absolute massive flexibilities. That would be my recommendation. Can one manage to live without any debt? So Agnes, yes, you can. We've proven it with Money Makeover. It is a psychological belief. Look, I think it's difficult with a home, but I don't mind debt on a home. It's the only debt I have because my asset is growing. It's my home. The asset is growing, it's worth something, the interest rates aren't that high. But I think you need to start by looking at your budget, working out how to come out on it. And I know people are saying, I don't have enough money. Look at side hustles, look at side gigs. We've covered a lot of this in Money Makeover. 3 of our candidates all have side gigs and side hustles that really help them to generate extra cash. So just start thinking differently. Stop thinking about credit as a financial solution. If a balloon payment is due, and one does not have the amount available, what do you do? I'm afraid you either have to sell the car to settle it, or you have to refinance. And 65% of people end up refinancing their balloon payment. So I think it's just terrifying. That just makes your car repayments now like even longer. But those are your two options. But again, start trying to plan for it. Try, if you do have to refinance it, do it in a way that you pay it off as quickly as possible. Property stokvels, I'm probably not going to go into these now, but property stokvels, yeah, I think unfortunately there are a lot of scams around them at the moment. I think if you're going to enter a property stokvel, do it with people that you know. It is complicated. I have actually done a podcast on it. You do need to know what you're doing. Like property. Property is, like I spoke about property investing, property is difficult. Not difficult, you need to know what you're doing. There's a lot of laws that apply. A group of people can't own it, so it has to be in a company's name. There's a lot that applies, but please don't just join some property stokvel that you're not familiar with because somebody's told you about it. I'm 21. Is there a thing as being too early to save or invest? What's the best advice? Okay. Yes, I think I've covered the credit score, but no, 21, it's never too early. I've just shown you the power of compounding. I did a story once about a guy. He was by the age of 28, he had R1 million. And this was a while ago, so where R1 million was probably worth more than it is today. I wrote this article about 5 years ago. And he had just started from his first paycheck. He had just simply put 50% of his money away. He was still living at home at the time. So really, it's never too early to save and invest. Oh, what happens if you don't reach your 36,000 Rand a year on your tax-free account? You lose it. So you're only allowed to put 36,000 Rand in that 1 year. So next year you can't go, so say you only put in half of that, you can't go and put in more than 36,000 Rand the following year. You can always restrict it to it. So it's kind of one of those things that you use it or lose it. And also very important, this is why I don't like tax-free savings accounts used as emergency funds or for short-term needs, is that anything you withdraw from a tax-free savings account, you also can't put back. So if because remember it's that 500,000 Rand lifetime limit. So if you draw out of it, it's not like your lifetime limit sort of slips down and you can sort of put it back in again. They assume that they only look at contributions. So any withdrawals, you cannot actually make up and put back in again. So it is really, for me, something for 10, 15 year or more investments for that reason. Let us know what you think about credit scores. Okay, yeah. Look, credit scores are incredibly important. If you haven't done it already, go get your free credit score. Every single credit bureau has to give you one free credit check a year. Go do it, check across all of them, understand it, make sure, because they are a big flag for ID theft as well. They can warn you that somebody's opening accounts or trying to open accounts in your name. Just learn and understand about it. The websites do have a huge amount of information about how the credit scores work. I also have a lot of information on my website about how to improve your credit score, but very important to know it. It's one of those numbers you need to know. Which are the safest short, middle, and long-term investments for a low-income earner? Okay, look, yeah, from that perspective, yeah, at the moment, cash is anything that's short term should be cash based. One of the things I would like to mention, though, is the RSA retail bond. That's also giving you pretty good interest rate. I think 7.5% at the moment, which is better than a normal bank account, because interest rates have come down quite a lot. So I would do that. And then, long term, I don't know what you call a low income earner, but for example, something like Satrix now, I think you can 50 Rand a month, you can put money away. In fact, you can put 50 Rand in whenever you feel like it. You don't have to have a lot of money to start investing. I'm only going to go on till we'll see how many questions we get through. I don't want to keep everybody online. Okay, money in a European account. Okay, yeah, just one comment on money in a European account. We see a lot of people sitting with cash offshore in cash. It doesn't earn you a single cent. So you're purely using that as a Rand hedge. So you need to look at that in total and say, what is it there for? What is it doing there? It was very interesting. I did an analysis over, I think it was from the end of the financial Rand. I can't remember the period of time, but it was the period of time of the Rand devaluing against the US dollar. And it was 6% per annum on average. Remember, it goes all over the place. It's up and down, but if you actually look over time, it's 6% difference. And that's actually what you earn, the difference between the money market rates between the US and South Africa over that period. So understand that, the depreciation in the Rand, if you're not earning anything on your euro interest rate, over time, you could have invested that money in South Africa and earned a good interest rate. So just think about that money offshore, what it's doing there, and if there are better ways for you to invest it offshore, that'll give you some sort of return. Keep that in mind. Velocity banking. Using credit card to pay off other loans. Okay, why? Yeah, no, I don't know. I haven't heard, not familiar with velocity banking. I'm assuming it's a strategy, using credit cards to pay off other loans. Right, okay, I think we went through that. I would doing the opposite. I'm not crazy about using credit cards. The Dave Ramsey book that I edited for South Africa, it's a brilliant book, but they stopped publishing it. And I've been trying to get the PDF for ages from the publishers, and I haven't been successful. So I'm afraid I don't have the PDF. I should have kept it. Oh, somebody's tried the envelope system. It really works. It does. The thing with the envelope system is like you get 3 months, the end of the month, 3 days for the end of the month, and there's no food in the house but a tin of baked beans. Yeah, and you eat the tin of baked beans. It's very good. Is it a good time to buy a house? I'm going to probably just do 2 more questions and then wind up. But is it a good time to buy a house? I really, really want to talk about these low interest rates we've got at the moment. So people are saying, wow, interest rates are so low for borrowing. Should I be buying property now? I want to keep in mind that we don't know what's coming up. We don't know if interest rates will go up again. So don't assume that the rate it's on now is going to be constant forever. It's quite low historically. So the chances are it could go up, could go down a little bit more. We could even see 2 more cuts by the end of the year, but that isn't going to be for the next 5 years. We don't know what's going to happen. So if you're going to buy a house now, don't rush into it because you think, oh, property prices are cheap at the moment. Property prices are going to stay cheap for a long time. Let me tell you, this economy is not hot, okay? This economy is very cold. I would rather you spend time with a strategy. In fact, where's my book? I want you to all buy this book. But this is my book, Money Questions Answered. I answer almost every single question that's come up in this stream is actually in this book. And in it, it talks about how to plan for property, to buying a home. And it really is, I want you to plan for it. I don't want you to rush in because you think property prices are low, interest rates are low. This is something I want you to spend time planning on. And also what I would really recommend is when you look at a property that you can afford, see if you can afford that extra 10% buffer repayment. That would be my advice there. I have 2 store cards whose balances have been settled, but the cards are still open for emergencies. Is it wise? Why would you keep store cards for emergencies? No. Just take your mind away. Start realizing you don't need a store card. If you don't need to buy clothes with credit, you don't need to. You can save for it. Okay, just start that mindset. Just take that mindset away. Yes, sometimes people keep credit cards for emergencies because you can put through a big billing amount if you need to. So my mom had to go to hospital last week. You know, you'd be able to hand the credit card, get that through, and then obviously settle the credit card from the emergency fund that you have. So that can make sense, but I don't see a store card. Just close it. And it costs you fees. I promise they're charging you fees and balance protection. I promise you, go look at the fees on those store cards. You can save that money. Oh, where can we get the book? Oh, we can get the book on my website, myourmoney.co.za. Gerald, I see Gerald's back on. He wants me to finish.
No. I'm just going by you. You said the last 2 questions, so I'm just here to help out. Look, everyone, this is why we'd like to allow everyone to participate over the next 4 weeks. All the content we haven't managed to cover today, you've seen the link, it's up there. We'll cover it next week. But obviously, we also have to take into account there's load shedding happening for a lot of people starting at 12. So we're going to start losing some people in the webinar. So I'd like to thank Maya, mayaonmoney.co.za, mayaonmoney.co.za. She'll take questions directly from there when she can. And obviously, the book is available. I look forward for everyone to join us. Now, one of the things Maya did talk about was starting to save early. So I did a quick calculation here. If you start saving 1,000 Rand a month, let's say you start working at 18 years old, by the time you're 35 at a 10% interest rate, which is quite good and possible over the long term if you invested in something underlying which has a higher risk, you'd have a balance of 486,000 by the time you're 35. Just from 1,000 Rand. Now imagine if you took that to a much longer period, it adds up over time. So starting early is definitely very important. A nice one which Maya covered as well was about the house. Yes, buying a house now is great because the interest rate is low, but it's going to go up. And every time interest rates go up by a percentage on a 1 million Rand home, that's another 1,000 Rand. So don't get too excited and think that it will stay that way unless the lender actually agrees to a fixed interest rate for the entire term of the loan. And obviously that's done on an individual basis. So Maya, thank you for your time. I wish you good luck for the rest of the day going snow hunting in Cape Town. And hopefully the snow stays in Cape Town. A reminder to everyone who participated, ways2save.co.za. You can actually view this recording there. Next week, same time, same back channel, we'll be having Arabile and myself picking up the same conversation around building financial resilience in these tough times. And Maya is always available on social media as well if you want to interact with her. Thank you to everyone in the back end of this production. And also thank you to ABSA for continuing to support us. So I look forward to seeing you everyone next week. Please sign up and let's pick it up next week just for an hour. It could actually empower you significantly. Thank you very much.
Yes. Thanks, Gerald. Bye-bye, everybody, and thanks for the great questions.
We're still